From the gridiron to the diamond, this is more than X's and O's. This is your best Florida sports podcast with CBS 12 News sports director John Evenson, producer extraordinaire Sam Sullivan, and Max Shepman with the lighter side of sports.
It's an exciting one this week, episode 14 of the Best Florida Sports Podcast.
You bought us these podcast shirts. I thought that was our uniform now, so I walk in with the shirt on.
First off,
you guys aren't even playing along.
First off,
yeah,
Santa bought them. Second, my washer broke. I swear my washer broke.
Is that like the dog ate my homework?
Yeah, totally. That's exactly what that is. But
Can you confirm that you did wash that shirt though, Evan?
I did not wash this shirt. Actually,
It's got that locker room stench.
I wore
to
it for
if
an
you
hour.
will.
Yeah,
this is a sports locker room that we're broadcasting
right.
from.
So now I look like the podcast guy, and you look like a guy at the Macy's Day Parade with his kid, and you look like you're at a Limp Bizkit concert.
This is
Limp Bizkit. Wow. All right.
This is anyway.
This is a
we don't
Dolphins
match,
color.
but that's all right.
Fine.
I match with Miami Dolphins. Speaking of the Dolphins,
Hold on, let's play it. Let's play it. Are you guys ready? Ready? Here we go.
Ready.
Oh yes, that's better than any Limp Bizkit song right there.
And it was an entertaining one against a division rival that was not looking well, but of course, Aaron Rodgers puts on a huge performance. Devontae Adams looking like that old Green Bay connection. It was just
Aaron
it was
Rodgers
a crazy game.
was not the Spirit Airlines.
No, he definitely was listening last
In the end,
week.
he was
Yeah.
very disappointed.
In the end,
Jets
he
fans.
was.
So, do you think that actually makes me think of a question? Was this the Dolphins? Was this more of a Dolphins overtime win and all of the glory, or was this, on the other side, was this more of another Jets meltdown loss? Because they've done that a lot lately. They've come into the fourth quarter with leads, and then they just blow it, as your family knows.
What was that word that we came up with last week?
Scromiting.
It was Katie Benty who came up.
Katie Benty, excuse us.
Credit there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was more of just a big overtime win for the Dolphins because regardless of records, I mean, a division game, it doesn't matter where each team is in for the standings. I mean, that was just a huge win by the Dolphins, competing, going all the way out, not having any missed field goals or losing by a game-winning field goal to be able to execute. And Jonnu Smith, man. And that
It was about damn time he got involved.
Yeah.
Were we going back and forth? I think we were talking, Max, about Jonnu. Like the guy, I started him in 2 of my 3 leagues. I have him as my tight end. Zero points. Like at the end of the game, end of regulation, 0 fantasy points. Like not like, I'm just trying to give you an idea of how much he did. And then in overtime, all of a sudden, like I think the first 2 plays were it might have been the second or third play.
Both screenplays.
Back to back. They almost looked exactly the same. Huge chunkage. And apparently he had gone up to Mike McDaniel and said, hey, get me involved here.
Nice.
I could win this for you. And sure enough, game-winning touchdown, Max.
Well, and you look at it, like we've talked about it in the previous weeks, he's been one of the most consistent Dolphins playmakers this year. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it took him all the way up to overtime to get involved was a little bit questionable. I will say our boy Jamian Sherwood from Jensen Beach obviously plays on the Jets. He did a tremendous job covering the middle of the field, kind of taking Jonnu away.
You're always locked in on the local guys.
Local guys. Got to give the local guys some love.
Yeah.
But I think, like what you just said, the fact that Johnny went to Mike McDaniel, like, hey, like, let me get involved in this game plan. And we saw, obviously, what we can do. Obviously, pretty much the winner of the game himself on that last drive.
And it shows how much opportunity there is on this offense and how, obviously we've talked at length about how it wasn't being utilized properly when Tua was out and stuff like that. But just the fact that a guy like Jonnu Smith could be completely silent through an entire game, and then all of a sudden you've got these new plays that they worked, like 3 huge ones, and more from Jonnu Smith moving forward as the fantasy football playoffs begin in many leagues this week. Let's just say that.
Hey, they're going to need him down this stretch, right?
That's right.
But that was a skin thickener for the Dolphins. You know what I mean?
It was.
A skin thickener.
Right.
Because they got to win 4 more of these suckers. And Houston, this will be the toughest one this week coming up, for sure.
Well, I think right now, according to, I believe, The Athletic, they have a 16% chance to make
17.
the playoffs.
I read 17.
Oh, 17 went up a percentage.
Yep, it's gone
Not
up.
bad.
It's like the Dow Jones.
1% off. 1% off. So, as I know we talk about it, it's a very slim margin of error here.
Yes.
Yep.
We'll get into this a little bit later. But yeah, I think like it was a big win to keep the Dolphins playoffs hope alive. Was it a pretty win? Absolutely not. I think a lot of people expected this to be a blowout, but we talked on the podcast last week. It's like this Jets defense really is no joke.
Right.
And you saw that pretty much the entire game until late in the fourth quarter where Tua was able to just walk down the field, obviously get the touchdown to Tyreek and then the two-pointer to Jalen Waddle to tie the game. So I also think, they just wore down the Jets defense towards the end of the game. So, I think, like you said, when it comes to rivals, divisional rivals, throw those records out the window because honestly, like, familiarity between all these teams is what makes these games close. And I think, like, to a lot of people's surprise that not like us, because, we predicted, like, okay, like, yeah, it could be a close game.
Didn't I predict the exact score?
You said, like, 42 points or something like that. You were way off on there.
Oh, I thought it was exact, but yet I was way off.
Right.
You were exactly way off.
Exactly
from that.
way off.
I'm a prisoner of the present.
But I will say,
yeah.
Granted, the Jets are not great, but I think this says a lot about the mental toughness of this football team, being able to not handle the game well at all, because there was a lot of fans who are like, yo, if the Dolphins lose to the Jets, you got to fire McDaniel right away.
Oh, heading into overtime, Tyreek talked about it. Like, we were walking out on that field, like, this is serious business. Like, this is our season right here in overtime. Thank goodness they never let the Jets offense touch the ball. What was your family? I guess we always want to hear how the Jets fans are doing.
I remember
Sam Sullivan has a large chunk of his
tweeted an update from his family.
As every
his
play
family is
happened,
Jets
after
fans.
that first Johnny Smith play happened, my uncle let out a huge, like, just sigh of defeat.
Oh, I thought
and
you were
then they
gonna
did
say
it
that was
again.
Fake as
and then the back-to-back, the exact same play, he yells out, they just ran the same play again.
Yeah.
And then later in that drive, you see the same play again, this time to Jalen Waddle on the opposite side. And he's like, this is it, forget it. They
That's
go on.
brilliant for McDaniel to keep going back to what's
that
working. 'Cause,
exact
like,
same
who would
play.
guess that he would do the same play?
You understand,
Yeah.
you give your playmakers the ball in open space and just let them do the rest. But then after they lose, I'm like, listen, at this point, you're just looking for a better draft pick. So you won in the sense of you had a competitive game, and then you also won that, you get to have a better draft pick. So.
And you wore green and black today and morning.
That looks like a teal. That looks more like a
This is
teal.
a Dolphins teal.
All right,
like
all
a
right.
teal.
It's
Black
halfway in
for
between,
the
I'd say.
professional look. It's
Yeah.
December. It's a little cold
Yeah.
outside.
I will say, one of the things that really did concern me was the Dolphins secondary. I don't think Jalen Ramsey had a great day. I believe he gave
Probably
up
his
4
worst
catches
game of the
for 96 yards, 97 yards.
Yeah, I mean, the two receivers, popped off.
Right.
Yeah.
It was like the most yards allowed by Jalen Ramsey in, I believe, 7 years.
I would like to see the Dolphins defense, looking ahead now, have just one of these games is going to have to be a defensive win, like something with a defense just like keeps them in it and like the defense gets the game ball from Mike McDaniel, because I know we haven't seen that all that much this season.
We haven't seen a complete
We've not seen a
performance
complete game.
from this team yet.
Although later on I'll be talking to Zach Sieler, the defensive tackle who won the AFC Defensive Player of the Week.
For the first time.
He's the coolest guy. So that's what we call in the business a tease. That's a
like that.
tease
Stay
right there.
tuned.
Do you know anything about when you have a tease? You tease the.
I am
Oh, you're a
quite
producer,
familiar,
right?
yeah.
Why?
I am
Who am I
quite
asking?
familiar.
Yeah, right. But Tua, can we talk Tua before we get
Absolutely.
to our
Let's talk to
analyst
him.
of the week?
Trust in
because
Tua.
Trust in Tua, and there's reason to trust in Tua, who, by the way, there was a news reporter, a couple news reporters there asking about Joe Burrow, the latest guy to have his
Home broken
his
into.
mansion
That's a crazy story, right?
Yeah, and Tua
Yeah.
steps. He's like, I've had security around my house for a couple of years now, and they are armed. So if you're thinking about coming to my house, like he was like,
Yeah,
"Go
he threatened
ahead,
him. Yeah, right.
make my day."
Yeah,
Hey,
right.
signing that big contract, he can afford it.
He can.
Tua's
He
the
can.
man. He's really, come out of his shell. Just to have an answer like that and
Yeah.
not shy away from it. He's obviously it's not a funny subject. Like it's very serious, but he stepped up and says he's got his house is surrounded by security guards.
And there's one thing on the flip side of his performance, what he's done this season.
Mm-hmm.
If there was a comeback player of the year award for like in season of like if you were to fall and go injured in the season, come back and perform at a high level, he would easily win that award.
Statistically, it's already won.
Yeah.
He's since his return in Week 8, he has the highest passing percentage, completion percentage in the NFL, and he's passed for the most yards since he's returned. So, I mean, the guy's on fire.
Right. He leads the NFL completions with 200, completion percentage at 76, and almost 2,000 yards passing.
Amazing.
Yesterday,
I think he's going to have his best game against Houston myself.
Sunday was the third straight game of 300 yards passing. Yep. Actually, he joined Dan Marino as the only Dolphins quarterback to do that 3 weeks in a row.
Who's he?
He's some random guy from Pitt.
Some QB who played for
some guy.
Well, okay, so we talk about Tua a little bit. My analyst this week is Alanis Timms from the Associated Press.
AP.
Yeah, so you can find her articles. She writes great stuff, and a lot of it's on our website, CBS12.com. We have that contract with the AP. The AP's the best, and she's just down there every week with us, grinding away, and she's at every game. Here's my interview with her.
We are here with Alanis Timms of the Associated Press. She covers the Dolphins, of course. You can find her articles everywhere, including our website. And what a big game, Alanis, for the Dolphins this week in Houston. Of course, they have to run the table in the Final Four. This, I think you'll agree with me, will be probably the toughest test of the Final Four and could give them a clear path to the playoffs if they win.
You're absolutely right. And Tua and Mike McDaniel and so many other players have talked about there being such little room for error going forward. And this, like you said, is one of their biggest tests to show that they can step up when their backs are against the wall, like we saw a little bit last week in the second half against the Jets. And so it'll be really interesting to see how they handle being on the road, a tough environment, a team like themselves is clawing to keep themselves in the mix.
We definitely need to see a strong offensive performance, I would say, from Tua Tagovailoa, who has been the talk of the league since he's come back. He leads in pass completion percentage since returning, I believe passing yards as well. What type of a test will this be against the Texans? I know they have a really strong, among the most elite pass rushes in the NFL.
Yeah, this will be a huge test for Tua, someone who, like you said, in the past few weeks since he's been back from injured reserve, has been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. It'll be interesting because, like you said, that pass rush is vaunted, but Tua gets the ball out of his hands so quickly. And Mike McDaniel was talking about that earlier today. With his quick decision-making, it'll be interesting to see that sort of matchup. But it's interesting, too, because this isn't the first talented pass rush that the Dolphins have faced this season. Mm-hmm. They faced Big Quinn and Williams and that New York Jets, that very good defense last week. And Tua wasn't hit in 47 pass attempts. Tua was not hit. He was not sacked. So this should be another opportunity for them to show what they can do.
That is really impressive. So I take it from reading between the lines there that you're expecting more of this short game offense that we've seen over the past few weeks. Just very, very cool to see Tua and Mike McDaniel come up with this very different looking offense to get them potentially 5 of 6 wins here.
Yes, for sure. And, they've been talking about the short passing game and kind of taking what the defense gives them. And, as defenses have keyed in on kind of limiting Tyreek Hill and Jaden Waddle down the field, that has opened up so many opportunities for a guy like Jonnu Smith, who, as we know, caught that overtime touchdown last week. He's been
no receptions during regulation play, and then he's just a beast in overtime. It was so cool.
You're absolutely right, and that kind of mimics the stretch that he's had for them in recent weeks. He's so good with yards after the catch. So when Tua's not forcing those balls down the field, making those smart decisions, he's dumping it off to Jonnu Smith, who is getting him 10, 15 yards after the reception.
Do you think the run game will come back in this game, considering I think if I'm not the big stats guy, but I think the Texans have given up like 4+ yards per carry. They're not the strongest against the rush. Let's put it that way.
I expect the Dolphins to lean more on the run game. That has kind of taken a step back in the past few weeks with that short passing game kind of getting going. Mike McDaniel has said that they've used those short and high percentage passes as like an element that kind of replaces the run game. But I can see them trying to get Devon Achane involved pretty early, getting Jalen Wright some touches pretty early, just to see what that does for this Texans defense.
Do you see, Decembers were so used to losses in the Mike McDaniel era and them trying to claw and hold on to a playoff spot. Do you see a path to them having just an ultra successful December and actually pulling off a playoff spot here in the end?
There is a path for them to do it, but they have to play desperately. They have to play clean football. They have to play like we said earlier, that there is no margin for error. And that's going to come down to some of those guys, those leaders in the locker room, kind of like pressing on, those things that they have to clean up. Guys talked about Tua and Tyreek and their leaders on the team telling them last week when the game was on the line, there is no room for us to mess up here. We have to go out here. We have to play clean football because our season is on the line.
It is already the playoffs for the Miami Dolphins. Alanis Timms will be in the press box watching, read her articles, Associated Press, and on our website, cbs12.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, some great takes right there. And another one that we could talk about here is the O-line. It looks like Teron Armstead is probably, I don't want to say he's injury prone, but he's older, and you never expect him to play an entire season. And amazingly, he has kept that offensive line, been part of keeping that offensive line as.
Is this like the John Evenson curse? Because, we interviewed Patrick Paul.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, maybe you cursed Teron Armstead.
That's a good point, because everyone was interviewing him today because he is the guy who is
taking
the
over.
rookie who's going to be playing for Teron Armstead likely this week. And the good news is, when he was in there during that Jets game, you didn't really notice a glaring difference.
I've got a good stat for you. You love stats?
Yeah, good. Because you can't replace Armstead. But before you give the stat, Armstead was on the sideline looking so depressed that he wasn't in the game.
Well, he only played 5 snaps.
Right. But he is... he is talking to Patrick Paul all the time, and it's the best mentor, as he told us last week. So he's in good hands as far as having that mentorship and that extra coach on the sideline. And he's got the size, he's got the reach, he's got the talent.
You know what that sounds like?
What?
Think of the opposite side of the ball with Calais Campbell and Chop Robinson.
Yeah.
It's just on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah,
having that
mirror image.
Right. Having that veteran that's been around the league, he knows what he's doing, taking a young guy under his wing. And I think that's what we've seen a lot from the Dolphins this year. And again, I think that's one of the reasons why Mike McDaniel kept Calais around, to teach the young guys.
The mirror, it's like me and you. Put a mirror right here, and here's the old guy.
Yeah.
There's the protege.
Under your wing.
Oh, God. He says it so sarcastically.
So here's the stat I wanted to bring up, right?
Okay, Brandon.
The offensive line on Sunday, perfect.
Yeah.
0 quarterback hits on 47 passes.
And this is with Paul in there for most of the game.
Right.
Yeah.
And we all know this Jets defense. They love to bring exotic blitzes, stuff like that. And the fact that Tua didn't get hit once with Patrick Paul in there.
Yeah. Did your Jets relatives ever say, come on, that's a rookie in there.
I don't think they would have known the difference, if we're being quite fair. But one of the other big, headlines is, you lose one, but the Dolphins might be getting another on the defensive side. Bradley Chubb nearing a return.
You know what? And people have been saying, he's been working. It's obviously been really tough trying to battle back from what was a season-ending injury last year. And it's almost like, once they're out of playoff contention, what would be the point of even bringing him back and risking it, right? So, this is pretty much the game for him to come back for. And if he were to come back for this Houston game, what an emotional boost it would be, right? So I think it would be pretty cool if, as we say, the defense did have an amazing game. He played a part, and you could say, wow, Chubb came back in the nick of time.
I will say, as much as of addition he can be, I feel like at least for this first week, you got to have low expectations. You figure it's going to be a very low snap count.
It's just him being there.
Yeah, that's
right?
fair. That's fair.
I think that would be a boost.
I think he's obviously been around the facility during this time, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right.
So, he's been involved.
Yeah, so I think, obviously being able to slide him in gently, obviously, to take some pressure off Chop and Calais and stuff like that.
Maybe just 6 or 7 sacks?
Yeah.
6
sacks. Oh, if he gets 7 sacks this
7
game,
sacks?
wow.
Yeah.
On 15 snaps. Just crazy.
Honestly, just put Bradley Chubb in the Hall of Fame after that.
Right then and there, yeah.
Absolutely.
His jersey would go
at
there.
the end of the game.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it would be great to see him back. The running game, though, here's a good thing heading in. I know we're jumping ahead of ourselves a little bit here with the Texans, but They have struggled with the run game.
That's an understatement, John.
Is it?
A very
Explain
big
to me
understatement.
Statistically, Max, why that might be an understatement.
All right, the last five.
Yep.
This is for Achane, right?
Yeah.
He's only averaged 2.9 yards per carry. He's only rushed over 60 yards once, and that was against Vegas.
Facts.
It has-
That's as factual as facts could be.
It has not. The running game of the Dolphins has, people say, has taken a step back.
Yeah.
I would say taken about 5 steps back.
yes.
It has been a
It has
struggle
regressed
to watch
tremendously.
the Dolphins run the ball.
The Texans are giving up 4+ yards per carry.
Oh.
So
It's a recipe.
And obviously, we'll get into this later, too. Joe Mixon's averaging about 4.5
Yeah.
yards per carry. So
whose futility on that back and forth will reign supreme? And you know what? The thing is, even
we'll
if
get
the,
into that during our preview.
yeah, and if the Dolphins don't get their running game going, it would be nice to see, but I don't think it's the end of the world either because the short pass game has just been incredible.
I think we finally got to see that huge game from Tyreek that we haven't seen since probably week 1
Yeah.
when he had that huge touchdown. I mean, 10 receptions, 115 yards, a touchdown, and then on the flip side, Jalen Waddle having another big game, 9 receptions, 99 yards. You need those guys to be getting somewhere near 10 receptions a game because that's how important they are to this team.
When you saw, especially with Tyreek, you saw, the passion, how fired up he'd be. He'd get a first down and do, the celebration. I was like, dude, that's how – I think that's what impressed me the most about with the Jets is, Tua was able to get Tyreek and Jalen involved very early.
Yes.
And not only early, but keep it going on throughout the entire game. And I think, okay, if your running game's not going to work, you have to keep at least those two involved the entire game.
And there's always John Ew. When you did that whole flex thing, I saw you kinked your neck a little bit. Are you okay?
No. That was a vein popping out of my neck.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, I see.
Relax.
So much muscle. You just don't unleash that, all right? There's only so much room
Dangerous.
at this table.
Dangerous.
All right, so let's get to my one-on-one with the man of the week on defense, Zach Sieler. Everyone wanted to talk to him, but I got some questions in here as well with our guy Zach Sieler, who is the AFC Defensive Player of the Week, almost 5 years to the day after the Dolphins signed him. He was released by the Baltimore Ravens.
Hate those guys.
He admitted that he thought that, maybe this was it. He was heading home. His car broke down, I think he was saying. But 5 years later, AFC Defensive Player of the Week in a massive win over the Jets. Here is Mr. Zach Sieler.
Congratulations on the award. Can you just talk to me about what that means to you? I'm sure you shared it with everyone who's been with you along the way. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been really cool. My wife and I were just talking the other day how about 5 years ago this week was when we were cut the second time from Baltimore and got down here. So to kind of come full circle and get the nod for Player of the Week is really something special. And I think it's been such a cool experience and journey to get here.
What are some of the things that stand out for you when you look back at all the hard work?
I just honestly, I think it's been a slow just building to this point and to not give up and to show the resilience. And that's just what I've always wanted to show on my name on the front of our jersey and the back. It's something I want to show my son and share with him every day. So to me, just to be able to come from where I came from and just from walked on D2, cut twice NFL to have even a chance of making it is just an incredible journey and makes me emotional because, coming from where I came from in high school, I was always told you'll never play in college, let alone in the NFL. And I think it's a cool story, and I love to share that and talk to kids and families and schools or whoever asks about that, and especially being from a small school in the middle of nowhere. Not a lot of scouts or people kind of came by that area, so it's pretty special and it'd be something cool.
When you talk about all the adversity that you have fought through, you must be the perfect leader here to see, 4 straight wins ahead. That's nothing compared to some of the stuff that you fought through, right? This is doable. The playoffs.
Yeah, I think it's taken on a week at a time basis. That's what I always focus on my whole career, my whole life. Obviously, you need to look big picture at some point, and it's, hey, look, to get there, we need to win out. And so it's what can we do this week? What can I do today to get to that point and could make that ultimately hit that goal?
Always love to see good things happen to good, hardworking people.
Kind of
Even
like
you,
Max.
Sam Sullivan. Oh, see, we were all
Kind of race to the top, you know?
we're all-
Started
Look how
from,
selfless
as
we
Drake
all
would
are.
say, started from the bottom, now we here.
Oh,
So
Drake!
since when was the bottom over here?
I don't know, dude. Like, we're up high on the table.
Didn't Drake go from here to here because Kendrick Lamar kind of like
Yeah, that
took him
was
down
He's
a
on the
couple
wrong side of the
notches?
take.
I want that battle to pick up
listen,
again,
the
but I
big-
do digress.
As the cool kids would say, hot take.
That's
That-
right.
that was for
the
the
big
young
narrative
ones out
though
there.
in the football world. Of
Yeah.
course, it's lining up again. It's another playoff caliber team
Mm-hmm.
that the Dolphins are facing on the road.
And
mean,
I will add, we were just talking to a defensive guy on one side. The the Texans, right? 42.
He's a little blind, everybody, so he's
glasses
working
on.
on it.
42. They have 42 pairs of socks. Oh no, sorry,
42
42 sacks. No, I know. I'm just 42 sacks and 16 picks over the season so far. So they're quite defensive-minded team, which is going to be
Fifth in the NFL for yards.
yeah. So it's a good thing too. As he said earlier, we could pick the clip out now where he says, "I get that ball off fast, brother," because he's going to need to do that against the Houston Texans.
Yeah, he definitely will. And their offense, the Texans' offense is no joke either. I mean, they of course are coming off a bye. A late bye can be,
They'll be fresh.
it could be. Yeah, it's really big for a team that's looking to make a playoff push. And that game that they played, that was when they played the Jaguars. It was the huge one where Trevor Lawrence gets, obliterated by Shahir. He gets suspended for 3 games, so we won't get
FAU zone.
Yeah, we won't see him on Sunday. Luckily,
Could you imagine the nightmare for the NFL if he
that
was on
lined
the other
up,
side with
yeah.
Tua?
Yeah, I would not be surprised if the
love the
NFL
former-
looked at that Dolphins game against the Texans, circled it, and said, "Yeah, we're gonna avoid that."
I was a little disappointed with the NFL because I was going to try to get Aziz on the podcast this week. But,
I know, former FAU star.
I know. They weren't going to
Yeah.
let us, no go.
Aziz.
You know what this game kind of reminds me of? The Jets game, just with a better offense.
Yeah.
Facing a tough defense.
Yep.
This time it's going to be a little bit different on the road. Obviously, we all know C.J. Stroud's not having a great sophomore year, which happens. You're a quarterback in the NFL. Coaches get tapes on you. But he still has plenty of weapons out there.
Yes.
So I feel like if you're a Dolphins fan, you kind of got to go into the mentality of like, yo, this is just the Jets part 2, just with a better offense.
It's also a very similar team in some ways to the Dolphins, right? Like some of the struggles that they've gone through. Like
Right.
it's almost like an equal, like they're both like kind of at the same point of their season where they got to win this thing, right?
I mean,
So,
obviously,
yeah.
Houston's coming off a bye, so they get an extra week to prepare for this.
Yep.
But maybe they'll be sleeping. Maybe they'll be tired and cranky off the bye. You know
It's like
what I
you
mean? Like,
walking in on Sunday morning after the holiday party.
yeah, exactly, like that. The Dolphins are kicking butt. They've got momentum going, and they're like, oh, we got another game. It feels like Monday times 10, and they come in and then they get their butts kicked. What did your analyst say this week? Who did you talk to?
So it's funny how you mention how C.J. Stroud having that sophomore slump, which of course has been the talk, around this Texans team. I talked to Will Kunkel, who's with Fox 26 over in Houston, and he said it's not him that's having the slump. It's that offensive line that's giving him such a tough time to.
And now they're
have
all
ti-
at his door at his station, the entire O-line, trying to knock down the door
Yeah,
and
be
get
like,
to
what are
him.
you talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I
We've
talked
had that a lot on the podcast. People coming to random doors.
coming to our household. So I spoke to him about the game. We of course led with that injury to Trevor Lawrence, that big hit, whether or not that suspension was deserving, and we dove into the Dolphins game. Let's take a listen.
Okay, so let's, jump right into it. Of course, you guys had the bye this past week, so let's go back to the first. Quite an eventful game against the Jaguars. Divisional game, you guys win 23-20, but, the huge talk of that game was that injury from Trevor Lawrence, the concussion, the hit. Al-Shahir gets suspended for 3 games. I want to ask, what were your thoughts on both that hit and the length of his suspension?
So I thought the hit deserved a suspension. And to be fair, Aziz does have a little bit of a history. I don't think he's a dirty player. Like I've talked about this. I think he plays the game extremely physically, and he's kind of like a habitual line stepper in that manner. And when you play the game that way, things like this are bound to happen. So I think it was a hit that deserved to be a suspension because he did punch a dude on the sideline against the Bears in week 2 on Sunday Night Football, and he didn't get ejected from that game. So he does have a little bit of history this year as well. And then you like the scrum that followed afterwards when the Jaguars attacked him, I don't care about either side. Like they're protecting Trevor, Aziz is protecting himself, and then whatever. Then he gets ejected, but then he re-engages and starts the second melee. And that's what pisses the NFL off, because that visual is all sorts of bad. And that's why I think he got the third game. I think it would have been knocked down to 2 without the melee. The hit deserved a suspension. It seemed like it was a big suspension, but I think when you look at what happened afterwards with the second melee in particular and him re-engaging after being ejected, that's why it happened. But again, I don't think he's a dirty player. I just think he plays this game in the way that a lot of us want it to be played, and then all of a sudden it happens and we don't really like it. And I do think that the rules have to be changed for the quarterbacks and how they slide, because it is much more dangerous for them to kind of play possum and then sometimes stay up. Like that's what happens when you slide late. I'm not blaming Trevor at all, but like these two guys are coming at a high rate of speed together, and all of a sudden that happened.
Yeah, it was certainly a lot to, unpack there, in that moment and what happened, of course, afterwards. But moving over to the game, as I mentioned, you guys won a close one against the Jags, coming off of that tough loss against the Titans where CJ Stroud threw some, 2 interceptions in both very crucial moments. What was it like to see him kind of bounce back, of course, going 22 for 34, 242 yards and a touchdown, to kind of have that, reinvigorating game for him?
So this will sound weird, but yes, CJ bounced back, but I think it was the offensive line that bounced back. The offensive line allowed CJ to be good. CJ's good. CJ's going to be good as long as he's allowed to be good. And if the offensive line doesn't give him protection, they're just, I was looking at a stat today that they are allowing him to be under pressure on deep balls like 48% or 46% of the time. When you have that, you're not going to have a good success rate throwing the ball down the field, which he doesn't. So against the Jaguars, he had a little bit more success because he had more time. So this team right now, especially offensively, obviously, goes as the offensive line goes. They don't do their job, no one else is going to be able to do theirs.
And your team has dealt with a lot of injuries from the receiver position this season. Of course, you lose Stephon Diggs for the year. But Joe Mixon, since his addition this year, he already has over 1,000, total yards, 12 total touchdowns. What's his impact been? How important is it for this team this season?
I don't think there's a word that can describe his impact enough. He is the MVP of this team. Without him, forget about it. The offensive line is okay at run blocking, but Joe Mixon makes them look very good a lot of the times. His ability to jump, cut, and go from right to left and find a lane that wasn't really intentional for him, but the defense all goes one way and he can go back the other way. It's been remarkable to watch. And without him, I have no idea where this team is. I don't think they're in the playoffs. The offense has been that bad. And the mindset that he brings as an alpha male, as a dog that wants to step on your throat and run you over, is immeasurable for this offensive line as well, because this is just not a very gritty, ugly type of line. They're a very pretty line that doesn't like to get their nose dirty a lot, like a lot of offensive linemen do.
Despite, some of those issues that they're working through, you've got the Miami Dolphins this Sunday, of course. They're coming off of a big win against a division rival in the Jets. There's some tough matchups for both sides, this week. Of course, you talk about, that offensive line for the Texans not playing so well, but Calais Campbell's, it looks like he drank from the fountain of youth. He's playing at such a high level. Their rookie Chop Robinson playing well. How do you think your offensive line is going to match up with this Dolphins D-line?
I think the offensive line should be okay against the Dolphins defense. I think this really comes down to can the defensive line of the Texans, which is elite, get to Tua quick enough to where the coverage in the back end doesn't have to be running around all over the place with their wide receivers. Because the Texans have a propensity to give up the big play. They've done it several times. They've even had a whole bunch of them that didn't connect for whatever reason, like Trevor Lawrence overthrows a guy, Anthony Richardson misses a guy, like wide open guys that should be game-winning type of touchdowns, and it doesn't happen because those guys just miss throws. Josh Allen did the same thing in Houston earlier this year as well. And those will be on display against the Dolphins if they can't get to Tua. So I think that's the biggest key to watch, is the Texans defensive line making the life easier for the back end for the Texans secondary.
Now, you brought up, of course, being able to try and, stop these receivers, of course, referring to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Will it come down to a situation where they try and either double cover Tyreek or bracket him or, potentially do that to Jalen Waddle to try and slow one of them down? What do you think their scheme is going to be for this game, going into it?
Yeah, I don't know. Tyreek is such a freak. Like, he runs as much horizontally as he does vertically as well. So like, my inclination is that you could sting on a guy and have Sting do his thing, but I don't think you can do that with Tyreek, because as much as Tyreek runs around, Sting would be exhausted, and Tyreek has the ability to come out of a game. Sting can't come out of a game. So I think they, some double coverage here and there, some bracket coverage mostly was likely what's going to happen. It's my guess. And I think they learned a lot from that Vikings game when they went out to Minnesota and they tried to play Justin Jefferson off coverage and one-on-one. It did not work at all. And since then, they've been pretty good at limiting the best wide receiver from the other team with some bracket help and some double coverage at time. And then also letting Sting just do his thing and shut guys down.
Yeah, there certainly is, a lot to look at from those matchups. And the last thing I have for you is, I ask every person that I interview for our podcast, I'm curious to know, what is your score prediction for this game this Sunday? Of course, it's a huge one for both teams. The Dolphins looking to get into that playoff hunt, and the Texans, of course, looking to lock up the division.
I'll go 28-23. Texans win, only because they're coming off the bye week. Like, for sure, I would pick the Dolphins if this was a game right after the Jaguars, because they just had the bye week 14. They needed that so bad. I think they come back rejuvenated. If they give up more than 23 points, I think the Texans lose this. But if they can keep it to 23 or fewer, Texans win.
All right, and that's the big talk of Houston. And Houston, I think we have a problem.
That is the exact title of the game that we're playing.
That is the most common Houston thing you could say, but it sounds like a good game.
It is a great game.
Yeah,
all right, here we go. Houston, we have a problem, all right? I'm giving you 4 players that could potentially cause a problem in this game. Good or bad.
Cause a problem.
Yeah.
I'll leave
Up to
to you
interpretation.
guys.
Yep.
All right.
And for the listeners who may be casual football fans, give their position and names.
Got it,
So
absolutely.
they can play along at home.
All right, ready?
That's right.
We talked about him already.
Yep.
Offensive lineman Patrick Paul.
Oh, Pat, I would say, like, he's not going to be as much of a problem. Problem is too strong a word. I just think that he
Might be an issue.
is advanced enough to keep on keeping on from where Teron Armstead.
That's at Houston. Keep on keeping on.
Let's keep on keeping on with this barbecue. I don't even know, like, do they have they do have barbecue in
Yeah,
Houston,
of
I'm
course.
pretty sure, famously. But
What?
Well, no, Kansas City,
Houston has
Memphis,
Texas
Houston.
known for barbecue as well.
Texas.
yes.
Oh, Texas, the state. Houston is in the state of Texas.
Oh, God.
I think so.
Okay. Oh, yes, they are.
Anyways.
Okay. So no, I just think he's going to keep that consistent O-line, the left side of the O-line
Right.
going, and I think Teron Armstead is going to make sure of that. So problem might be a little strong, but I think we'll be happy with his play.
I think he's going to cause a problem for the Texans because they've only got 1 game's worth of film on him. I
Okay.
think he's going to cause a problem for them.
I like that.
Nice.
I
That's a
think
good
it's,
take.
Yeah, I like
Thanks.
that. I think
Yeah.
it's going to be a little tough, man. You got
The
Daniil
barbecue
Hunter,
sauce on
Will
the cake.
Anderson. I think Daniil Hunter has 10.5 sacks. Will Anderson's right behind him. So, could be a problem.
Could be.
a problem.
That would be great if he was, because as we know, the Texans are a
defense,
problem.
yeah.
Their
Yeah.
defense could be a problem.
Yeah.
All right. Here we go. Number 2. Again, we talked about him a little bit earlier. Didn't have the greatest game against the Jets. But how about cornerback Jalen Ramsey? Just think, he's going against Nico Collins, Tank Dell.
I'm gonna go with it again. I think he will cause a problem for the Texans. He will shut down each receiver that's on him. I don't know if he's going to shadow a guy for the entire game, whether it be Nico Collins or somebody else, but I think he will cause a problem for this Texans team.
Redemption game
Yep.
for Jalen Ramsey. This guy does not take being perceived as having a weak game lightly. He will come back with a vengeance, and I think we're going to see some big plays out of him.
For sure.
All right, I
Yeah.
like it. All
Yeah.
right. We got 2 Texans for you. You ready?
Already.
First one, running back Joe Mixon.
He's already got over 1,000 total yards, 12 total touchdowns.
Real quick, what a crazy story. Like Cincinnati's just like, yeah, we don't really want you here anymore.
Wow.
And what a spark that he's brought to this
my
Texans
gosh.
offense.
Yeah.
And you heard in that interview that I had with Will Kunkel, he said without Joe Mixon, who knows where this team is right now.
Yeah.
So with that said, I'm
Double
going
problem.
to go with again. Yeah, I think
Double
I think
problem.
he's going to cause a bit of a problem for this Dolphins defense. It might not be all that crazy, but I still think he's going to find a way to get over 100 yards.
Yeah, he's going to be the guy. Like I think and I keep bringing up fantasy football, but every time my opponent has, I don't have him on my, so that he's been the difference that week.
I've tried trading for him multiple times. So
yeah, he is always a problem, Joe Mixon. So I can't imagine that the Dolphins are going to have an easy time with him.
Again, almost 4.5 yards per carry this year.
scary.
Good.
Yeah.
All right, last one. Again, we talked about him a little bit. Nico Collins, wide receiver.
Well, I already said that Jalen Ramsey is going to cause a problem, so no, I think he is going to be a problem for the Texans. I don't think he's going to be able to get anything really going that much. I see them utilizing more of Dalton Schultz, their tight end. I think they're going to have to go to that a little bit more with Nico Collins hopefully getting shut down by the Dolphins defense, so I think he will be a problem.
I think he'll be rather neutralized. I think that he'll have his moments in this game,
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't think he's going to be like a major
Something in the
problem.
70-yard range, you'd say.
Yeah,
reception
yeah, he'll
yards.
be. But I just
An
don't.
average
I think
fantasy
he's going to
week.
go off.
All right.
I think as we were talking about earlier, Ramsey's going to be on a little
Have
bit
a
of
redemption
mission
tour.
here.
That's
Yeah, I
right.
think
Yeah.
the Dolphins overall, positionally across the board, they're all really motivated for this game. So
All right, well, let's a quick game prediction to end it up.
I'll go 30-24 Dolphins.
yeah.
Wow. All right.
Similar spread. I mean, I think it's good. I was going to say 28-25 Dolphins.
25, interesting. Little safety or
win on a
two-point conversion on it?
28-25, they win on a field goal.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know how they're going to get to 25.
You know math, though, right?
Yeah, I do. The 25, though.
I don't know. They'll
We'll
get
find
there.
out, 'cause
Yeah.
it'll happen.
It's just
Hey,
something I've
hey, maybe we can
envisioned.
get another
It's something I
score-origami.
envisioned in my head.
All
Love those score-origamis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we go 35-28 Texans.
Oh!
I just
right after that speech.
sorry.
Yeah.
I just think they're going to rely heavy on Joe Mixon. And obviously, like, I know the Dolphins' run defense is a little
So you
bit
think Joe
stingy.
Mixon's going to be a problem?
I think Joe Mixon, Houston, he's not your problem. I think Joe Mixon's going to be the solution to this game. I think, again, C.J. Stroud's going to make just enough plays, keep him in it. Joe Mixon's going to wear down the defense, so I'm going to go 35-28.
If the Dolphins lose, they have a problem.
Well, he's got reverse psychology going. I know he really wants the Dolphins, and I'm going to call it now. Bradley Chubb going to force a fumble. Joe Mixon.
Oh!
Here first. Episode 14. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. Follow us on all our social media. We're on TikTok. Evanson, we're going to get him to post some videos of himself.
And
opening
wash
these
that
gifts
shirt.
one day.
You should see what I'm going to wear next week. I'm the only guy who wore the podcast.
I will wear that next week, I promise. My
I'm gonna
washer
wear
will
a
get fixed in that
Santa
time.
suit or something. We'll see.
Thank you guys once again for tuning in. We'll be back next week, and go Dolphins.
Cue up that Dolphins song for next week's episode,
I got
baby.
you, dude. I got you.
Best Florida Sports Podcast drops every Thursday morning. Listen on your favorite platform or watch on YouTube.